It was a quiet night in suburban Florida, calm, peaceful, and ordinary. But at exactly 11:47 p.m., a doorbell rang, and what followed turned into one of the most chilling murder cases in the state. Sheylla Cabrera, a 27-year-old nurse, had just come home after a late hospital shift. She lived alone in a small townhouse she'd recently bought, hoping for a fresh start after ending a toxic relationship. The next morning, her sister found Sheylla dead, lying in the living room, no signs of forced entry, and no weapon in sight. Just silence, and a faint trace of fear frozen on her face. Detectives were lost, until a neighbor handed them a piece of evidence that changed everything. The doorbell footage. What that camera recorded shocked everyone. A man appeared at Shella's door, smiling, holding a bouquet of flowers. 30 seconds later, the smile was gone, and Sheylla Cabrera was never seen alive again. Sheylla Cabrera was the kind of woman people remembered, not for her looks, though she was striking, but for the calm warmth she carried wherever she went. At 27, she had already seen more chaos than most do in a lifetime. Working night shifts as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Orlando, she had spent countless nights comforting patients who had no one else. Friends said she had a heart that refused to give up on people. Ironically, that same heart made her trust the wrong man. For nearly 3 years, Sheylla had been in a relationship with Mark Dillon, a local mechanic. At first, he was charming, funny, and attentive, the kind of man who sent good morning texts and surprise coffee runs. But over time, the sweetness faded. Mark grew possessive, controlling, and unpredictable. Arguments turned into shouting matches, and Sheylla began to fear the man she once thought she'd marry. When she finally ended things, it wasn't with hate. It was with exhaustion. She packed her things, moved into a small townhouse on Lakewood Drive, and told her sister Maria, "I just need to breathe again." Life was supposed to start fresh there. She repainted the walls, filled her living room with plants, and even adopted a cat. Neighbors described her as quiet but friendly, always offering a smile on her way to work. She was rebuilding, slowly, carefully, trying to find herself again. Sheylla had started dating a new man, Ethan Rhodes, a paramedic she met at the hospital. He seemed gentle, supportive, and patient. Everything Mark wasn't. For the first time in a long while, she looked genuinely happy. But something in her still carried unease. A few nights before her death, she told Maria she felt like someone was watching her house. Once, she thought she heard footsteps outside her door. Another time, she noticed the motion light flicker on in the middle of the night. Maria brushed it off as nerves. After all, Sheylla lived alone for the first time. Still, Sheylla couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, hadn't truly let her go. And when the doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. on that cold Friday night, she had no idea that the face smiling back at her wasn't there to bring flowers. It was there to end everything she'd just begun. The doorbell footage began like any ordinary visit. A quiet suburban street, dim porch light, and a soft chime at exactly 11:47 p.m. Sheylla Cabrera's home camera captured every second with perfect clarity, a moment that would later haunt everyone who saw it. The man at her door looked familiar. He stood there with a bouquet of red roses, wearing a dark jacket, smiling as if he was visiting an old friend. To anyone watching, it looked harmless, even romantic. But the stillness in his eyes told a different story. Detectives would later replay that clip hundreds of times, freezing each frame to catch even the slightest movement. When they first saw it, they immediately recognized the man as Mark Dillon, Sheylla's ex-boyfriend. He had been questioned before, known for his temper and jealousy. The flowers in his hand matched the kind he used to bring her after every fight, a pattern that felt almost ritualistic. But there was something strange about the footage. The timestamp didn't align with his alibi. Mark claimed he was at home that night, 2 miles away watching TV. The footage, however, placed him at Sheylla's doorstep just minutes before her estimated time of death. The detectives noticed small inconsistencies too. Mark's hair looked shorter than in his driver's license photo, and his posture seemed off, as if the man in the video was mimicking him, not being him. Still, they couldn't ignore what they were seeing. A man who looked exactly like Mark, holding the same roses he once used to apologize with. Then came the most unsettling part. After ringing the bell, the man waits. The motion light flickers on and off. He shifts his weight, glances over his shoulder, and then, from the far edge of the frame, a shadow moves. It's brief, almost imperceptible, but there's definitely someone else near the porch. Seconds later, the door opens slightly, and Sheylla appears. She's wearing her hospital scrubs, tired but smiling politely. The man hands her the flowers. She says something. There's no audio. And then he steps closer. The last clear image shows her turning her head, as if surprised by something behind him. Then the camera glitches, static floods the screen, and the recording ends. When it resumes 10 seconds later, the porch is empty. That short clip, less than 1 minute long, would become the center of one of Florida's most disturbing murder investigations. The next morning, the Florida sun rose over Lakewood Drive like any other day, bright and warm, unaware of the horror waiting inside house number 1142. At 8:32 a.m., Sheylla Cabrera's sister, Mariah, pulled into the driveway. She had been trying to call Sheylla since midnight. No answer, no read receipts. That wasn't like her. Even after a 12-hour shift, Sheylla always texted back, even if it was just a sleepy emoji. Maria sat in the car for a moment, staring at the front door, something in her gut tightening. The front gate was open. The porch light was still on. She rang the bell once, twice, nothing. Then she noticed the door was slightly ajar, just enough to make her heart pound. "Sheylla?" she called softly as she stepped inside. The air was unnervingly still, a faint trace of coffee lingering. On the kitchen counter, Sheila's purse lay open, her wallet untouched, her keys beside it. The TV in the living room flickered silently, a paused episode of a medical drama she must have been watching before bed. Maria's eyes caught something else, a coffee mug on the floor, still half full, next to a single rose petal. Her heart sank. She walked further in, calling her sister's name again. And then she saw her. Sheylla was lying near the couch, motionless. There was no visible blood at first glance, just an eerie calm, like she'd simply fallen asleep. But as Maria moved closer, she realized Sheila's neck was at an unnatural angle, and her eyes were open, wide, frozen in silent terror. Maria dropped to her knees, screaming her name, shaking her shoulders, hoping for a breath, a heartbeat, anything. But it was too late. Within minutes, the house was swarming with police and paramedics. Officers noted no signs of forced entry. The lock wasn't broken, the windows were intact, nothing was stolen. Whoever did this had been let inside willingly. Detectives immediately secured the doorbell footage from the neighbor's security system across the street, hoping for answers. When the medical examiner arrived, she confirmed Sheylla had died sometime between 11:45 p.m. and midnight, the same window when the doorbell camera captured that mysterious visitor. As officers covered her body and led Maria outside, she could barely speak. Through tears, she whispered the words that would define the investigation. She opened the door for someone she trusted. Detectives began their investigation within hours of the discovery. The crime scene was meticulously clean, almost too clean for a break-in. No fingerprints, no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds on Sheilla's hands. The roses from the night before were scattered near the coffee table, petals darkened by dried water. Investigators pulled the doorbell footage immediately, and the man in the video became their prime suspect, Mark Dillon, the ex-boyfriend with a record of anger issues and a motive rooted in jealousy. It seemed straightforward. But as detectives started checking timelines, the picture began to blur. Mark swore he hadn't seen Sheylla in over a week. He said he was home watching a basketball game, even provided text messages to prove it. His phone's GPS placed him miles away during the estimated time of death. Yet the camera didn't lie. Or so it seemed. The man looked exactly like him. Same build, same haircut, even the same leather jacket he used to wear. When police searched Mark's house, they found that jacket hanging in the closet, spotless, no trace of blood. But the detectives noticed something odd. The bouquet of flowers in the footage was wrapped in paper from a florist across town, one that Mark hadn't visited in months. Then came the second figure. When technicians slowed the footage down, frame by frame, they noticed a faint movement in the background, a shadow passing near the edge of the porch. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough to raise doubts. Someone else was there. The lead detective, Sarah Holt, ordered nearby surveillance cameras checked within a 3-block radius. One camera caught a dark SUV circling the neighborhood around the same time, headlights off. The investigation widened. They interviewed neighbors, co-workers, and friends. Most described Sheylla as kind and cautious. No one could imagine her opening the door that late, unless she knew the visitor. Then one nurse from St. Mary's mentioned Ethan Rhodes, Sheila's new boyfriend. He was charming but possessive, sometimes waiting for her after shifts, even when she asked him not to. He also happened to drive a dark SUV. When detectives brought Ethan in for questioning, he seemed calm, almost rehearsed. He claimed he was on call that night, but couldn't produce a verifiable dispatch record. His hands trembled slightly as he signed the witness statement. As he left the room, Detective Holt turned to her partner and said quietly, "He's hiding something. And it's not just guilt." The truth unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. For weeks, investigators had chased Mark Dillon, convinced he was the man on that doorbell video. But every lead ended in contradiction. His phone records held steady, his car never left his driveway, and security cameras from a nearby gas station confirmed his alibi. It didn't make sense, unless someone wanted it that way. Detective Holt kept returning to one detail, the second shadow in the footage. Whoever that was had vanished without a trace, but the body language, the posture, even the way that figure tilted his head, it wasn't Mark. It was someone imitating him. Then a breakthrough came from forensics. The lab matched a partial fingerprint on the florist wrapping paper found near the body. It wasn't Mark's. It belonged to Ethan Rhodes. When detectives confronted him, Ethan didn't flinch. He sat in silence, his face blank, eyes hollow. Holt pressed harder, describing every frame of the footage, the flowers, the smile, the moment Sheylla opened the door. Finally, Ethan exhaled and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." He confessed in fragments. He knew about Sheila's doorbell camera. He had even helped her install it weeks earlier. When he realized she was still in contact with Mark, jealousy consumed him. He found one of Mark's old jackets in Sheila's closet, bought identical roses from the same florist, and decided to confront her. Not as Ethan, but as the ghost of her past. His plan was to scare her, to make her believe Mark had come back. But rage took over. When she tried to close the door, he forced his way inside. One push, one moment of uncontrolled fury, and she fell. He panicked, staged the scene, and left, thinking the video would frame Mark perfectly. When the confession aired on the local news, the city froze. The man who had played the grieving boyfriend was the killer all along. Detective Holt watched Ethan being led in handcuffs to the patrol car, his eyes still cold, emotionless. She later said, "It wasn't the camera that solved the case. It was the lie he thought the camera would tell." The doorbell that once captured love now stood as silent witness to betrayal. A reminder that sometimes the face smiling at your door isn't there to say hello.